All right.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah, for reminding us to record. So Exodus 18, 1 through 9. Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he sent her home, along with her 2 sons. The name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eleazar, for he said, the God of my father was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And when he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hands of the Egyptians. So what do you see? What do you notice? And of course, what questions does it make you ask?
On yours, it says her sons, and mine, it says his sons.
What do you think? Why would, how many of your translations say her sons like mine? Couple, handful?
I got 2 translations that has one of each.
Whose has the his sons? Go right ahead. Yours says her sons. So what would the significance be here? Depending on which one it is, why would it matter whether it says his sons or her sons? First marriage or second marriage?
Coming from like a teacher standpoint, it tells about who the story is actually about.
So say a little bit more about that. In case you couldn't hear Braxton said, from a teacher standpoint, it makes you understand who this story is about. If it's her sons, then the story is about her. If it's his sons, the story is about him. How would it change the story based on just what I've read if it's her sons? The father-in-law is saying, these are essentially my daughter's children, not yours.
Is that because he's not been around?
So I'm going to read another sentence from mine. And it says, verse 2, now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, and had her sent home.
Oh.
After he had sent her home. Where is her home, technically? Remember, we've talked about this. When they get married, becomes their home? With their husband, right? So if he has sent her back to her dad,
Oh, he traded her in.
not quite, but you're getting closer to what I think it's trying to imply. They are his kids. Her dad is making it very clear. I'm here, I'm your father-in-law with your wife who should be with you, and you sent her back to me. are you divorcing her or what's going on? Because she should stay with her husband. And her and her kids should stay with her husband. That's their family now. But yet he sent her back home.
It wasn't safe.
So on the one hand, we could give Moses maybe a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's just not safe. I mean, they just had a battle with the Amalekites, and they are in her home territory, right? Midian. They're in her. But
Wouldn't he put his faith in God to keep his family safe?
shouldn't he put his faith in God to keep his family safe? But what does he do? He sends his wife and kids home to be with her dad. New car. We're not trading in support. That's not what's happening.
Okay, but then why does my version say your sons?
So I think part of it is on the one hand, it both softens it to say his sons instead of her sons, but it also implies the backhandedness of the visit. What are you doing that you sent my child back home? Are you not willing to take care of her anymore? After all, you got your sons here with me when they should be with you.
Well, it doesn't really say when Moses sent her back. I mean, I was assuming it was years ago. They're saying now he sent her back and then.
She went with him to Egypt. She was there the whole time. She's come out of Egypt.
That's why they need to stop it.
That's why, Grant says, that's why they made it stop in her dad's land. You know, Zipporah dear, it's gonna get hairy. You might as well just stay with your dad for a little bit.
How did Jethro know in the wilderness where to find him?
I don't know, how do you find 3 million people in the middle of the desert?
Gotta have a whole lot.
Hang their phone.
Are you seeing that this story is kind of strange all of a sudden? If you're just reading it, it sounds like Jethro comes for a visit, right? Father-in-law comes to check on things. Except he's not just coming to check on things because he is what does it say? He is a priest of Midian, right? But not just if he's a priest of Midian. If you remember when we met him back in Exodus chapter, 4? Chapter 3. No, chapter 2. It implies that, remember, his father-in-law is a priest of God Most High. Yes.
Hannah Leper asks, is there a difference between his and her in the original Hebrew?
Thank you, Hannah, for making me do extra work. Chapter 18. I brought this up because I assumed someone was going to ask me a question. I need to pull up these. And we're talking. What verse was that?
2.
Verse 2. The Hebrew is even less nice to Moses. And Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, is taking Zipporah, the woman of Moses, after her dismissal.
It sounds like he was sending for protection, does it?
The Hebrew doesn't give him the benefit of the doubt that he's sending her home for protection. No, but as far as his or her on the children, it is very emphatic in the Hebrew, her sons. Which, if he has dismissed her and sent the kids with her, they would no longer be his sons. Custody battles is whoever the kids are with, that's who they belong to at this point in time in human history.
New Living Translation puts him as his son.
I think to say that they are his sons is being kind to Moses.
Maybe they were rotten kids and he just sent them home to their grandpa. He didn't like them either.
If you go into 4, it says his second son was named, and I can't pronounce any names in the Bible, but Ezer, where Moses had said, so Moses named him.
Moses did name them, yeah. He claimed them at one point.
So they just changed their names when he claimed them?
So typically, it is the father's responsibility to name the sons.
So they went for 5 years without a name.
No, they have names. What it's implying here is somewhere along the way, after they crossed the Red Sea, Moses is like, something's going on, and Moses is like, okay, you're just better off going back to your dad. This is not gonna work. I don't know if he's afraid for his family because, I mean, we've already had them grumbling against Moses, right? We've already seen scarcity of resources.
It's kind of busy to be a husband and a father at the same time as taking care of all these people too.
He's kind of a little bit of a
To
workaholic.
give him the benefit of the doubt.
To give him a little bit of benefit of doubt.
Maybe she kept making honey-do lists.
Get the sand out of town.
I just, again, I want, when we pay attention to the words that are there, it paints a far more interesting story, doesn't it? And it doesn't put Moses necessarily in the best of light, does it? So,
I see Moses as God's man, and he's doing a job. He's got to protect his family.
are you saying just because he's God's man, he can't make a dumb mistake?
But are we 100% sure these are actually his?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
That, nowhere in scripture has that ever been even implied that
Okay.
they aren't his kids.
Then maybe they were like hers from a previous, okay.
Because remember back when they met, she was a young lady and he was just old enough to be an adult, but so, no, there's not any question. And the irony here is, we don't know how old his kids actually are. They might actually be adults. Because they were, remember, Moses was approximately 40 whenever he ran after he killed the Egyptian. He spent about 40 years in the wilderness himself before God sent him back. So at age 80, he is called to go, let my people go, and pull them out of Egypt. So his sons could be adults at this point. I mean, they really could be. But regardless of their age, something isn't quite adding up at this point. Right? What? And the father-in-law, who is a priest of God within the country of Midian, is coming to investigate, and he's bringing his daughter and grandsons with him because we're going to get to the bottom of this.
But he's gotta be 100 years old.
He's probably getting pretty old as well, yeah. And remember, at this point in time in human history, do you take someone's word for something? Well, it is by the 2 or 3 witnesses that you can verify something is true. How many witnesses are there? Well, I'm saying about this little family squad.
No.
If you go with the standard notion that a woman's word is not always considered valid, it could be the 3rd witness, but it can't be the 1st or 2nd. If he brings the 2 sons with him, I'm just saying, that's the culture of the day. A woman's word was not good enough. You had to have her husband substantiate it.
Or father.
Or father. So if the father and 2 sons are coming, plus her, is there enough witnesses to make a claim? Yeah. Are you starting to get the picture here? Now, my hope is, and again, we haven't read forward yet, I'm hoping that maybe it just after the battle with the Amalekites, he's like, look, you guys are better off just being safe with your dad. He knows the terrain, he knows the environment. You really don't want to be here with all these grumbling Israelites because they're already mad at me a couple times. And I don't want them taking it out on you guys. I hope that that's what's going on. That's my hope. But I have to be honest, it's not looking very good for Moses right now. Any other thoughts or questions about the first 9?
So he didn't send her home until after the fight with the,
Again, we don't
Okay.
really know. We haven't been given enough clues as to when she got sent home. And I'm really hoping, I like the notion the English translates it sent home and not dismissing her. But that almost implies divorce. I mean, that's definitely not good.
Maybe she was a complainer and a whiner.
I was more thinking that maybe the boys were just power hungry or something. I don't know. But any other thoughts? Any notes? Nope. Okay, let's go on to the next paragraph, 10 through 12. Jethro said, blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hands of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses, Moses' father-in-law, before God.
sounds like he forgave him.
Maybe, but at least as Leah said, Jethro's the one praising God. And Moses, who again is the leader of the Israelites, who's been watching all these miracles God has done, has Moses done this?
God's
What?
done it for Jethro. He's not giving Moses any.
Jethro is giving God all the credit and not really giving Moses any.
My Bible says Moses wasn't even invited.
Post office lost his invite.
So Jethro comes in functioning like a spiritual leader amongst the Israelites. And the Israelite leaders receive him. They make the sacrifices. He's functioning not just as a leader, but as a priest for the Israelites as well, right?
Kind of like he's not even recognizing Moses.
He's definitely not giving Moses his due. But then, I don't know, anybody in this room ever felt like your father-in-law didn't really like you all that much?
Oh. There was valid, but there wasn't.
The time when I didn't like you was your fault.
You're not. That's why I said, it was not.
Again, this chapter is not helping Moses, this paragraph here is not really helping Moses' case yet, is it? When I read through this the last couple of times, I glossed over all this. I don't know how I missed these little details, but if you just read through it fast, you missed the story. Right. Anything else, or do we need to read the next paragraph and see if things get a little bit better?
Well, it's kind of like Jethro planned ahead that he brought a burnt offering. I mean, it's like he had an agenda.
What? Surely not. He's brought Moses' wife, Moses' kids, he's brought sacrifices, he's brought stuff to have a party.
So he doesn't want them either.
I was thinking that.
I don't know if you
They eat too much. You need to take them back.
on my way through this party. That's not building a very good picture for Zipporah and the kids. So, should we be surprised that Moses' family is exempt from what we read in the book of Genesis? I mean, really, is the family all that put together? We should be. It's a different book. Different book, different generation, probably the same brothers.
Okay, so how long has Moses been in leadership at this point?
Well, it's been about 30 days since they left Egypt, and it was about 30 days in Egypt,
All
or
the
maybe,
plagues and all that.
maybe we're talking 3 months.
Yeah, so he's kind of new to this yet too.
So
And he has a speech impediment or whatever, he doesn't speak well.
thank you for
He's got-
standing up for Moses.
He's got, see, the older I get, the more I root for the underdog. I understand the whiners and complainers. The older I get, the more I understand the whiners and complainers. At the beginning, you're going, God's got this. After a while, you live your life and you realize that you became a whiner and a complainer yourself.
Yep.
Right, Steve?
I have a little different outlook on it.
Okay, go for it.
Bear in mind, I haven't been here for everything.
Right. Go for it. This is my friend Chris, by the way.
Hi, Chris.
Thanks for visiting us this week.
To me, it's a humanizing story.
Okay.
There's this big, all powerful God. Moses is supposed to be representing him. To Moses' father-in-law, that none of that matters. His kids, his grandkids, and his kid matter. So yeah, you might be here representing God, but you took my daughter. That's who you're supposed to be taking care of. That's how I take that.
I think that's absolutely part of what's going on here. And with Jethro being a priest of God too. The whole thing that you point and made. Moses, it doesn't matter what you've done for the people of Israel. I've been doing that same thing for the people of Midian for X number of years. You're only 3 months on the job. You should be doing a better job than us. And thus the next paragraph.
The holier than thou attitude.
I don't know that it's a holier than thou attitude, or it's just one of these things like maybe you say, look, young whippersnapper, I've been around a long time, it's time for you to sit down and listen.
But really, he wouldn't be that much of a young whippersnapper.
I mean, again, yes, Moses is 80, but Jethro's probably close to 100, 120.
Okay.
So next paragraph. 13 through 23. This is a little bit longer. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice." There's that young whippersnapper part. "I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the peoples as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter that they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct them. You will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace." So now what do you think?
Maybe that explains why Moses sent his family home.
Maybe
He was overwhelmed with other duties.
he was so overwhelmed with his duties, this guy.
His father-in-law put him in his place.
His father-in-law absolutely put him in his place.
And yet, his counsel was good.
And his counsel was absolutely good.
And he's a bit more experienced than, even though Moses has had burning bushes and all kinds of things, it's still,
It doesn't matter how many miraculous experiences you have, there's nothing as good as experience.
Also,
Long term,
Calling the art of delegation.
guard delegations. What do you say, Chris?
It's misguided. To listen to it over here, it sounds to me like Moses is the young guy that got promoted too quick and thought too much of himself. Somebody that has more experience told him, hey, you're putting things aside you should be putting aside because you think you're bigger than you are.
So whether it's the fact that he's concerned about his family because of the battle, whether it's purely because he's overwhelmed and he's been promoted too quick and he doesn't know how to handle all these people coming to him, he was misguided in sending his family off. He probably, my assumption is he probably thought he was doing it for their good. He's like, you'd be better cared for if you go back home with dad. I don't want you to have to deal with both the grumbling of the people and all these battles and everything else that's going on. And Jethro comes and puts him in his place and says, okay, let's fix this. Because how you're doing it isn't working, because as a man of God, you got to take care of home first, right?
But he didn't say that.
He didn't say it, but he pretty much implied it. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much. Maybe I am, but it seems like a fair connecting of the dots, doesn't it?
Well, it says the people stood around him morning till evening, so he didn't have time to go home, talk to his wife or anything like that. So now I have a really good.
I guess I could probably hear this conversation where he comes home late at night every night, he's dealing with all this stuff, and Cora's like, when are you gonna spend time with us? And he's like, if you just wanna complain about it, your dad's just across the hill, go home. And then she did. And he's like, and then Jethro comes back with her, it's like, oh. Sure, Gary?
I don't know what problem with this. Moses is a man of God, right?
Yep.
Is he not praying to God for help?
I would assume he is, but let's just be honest. It doesn't matter if you're a man of God or not. We all can fall prey to the tyranny of the now. Everything that's right in front of you, you get so caught up in what's going on right in front of you that you miss the more important things.
But that's God's will.
I don't think that's God's will. I understand there's a difference between God's will and what God allows. Do you get the subtle difference? I mean, because again, God gives us all free will. We can all choose how we want to live. We can choose how we're going to be in this world. And the people understand Moses has a unique relationship with God. So therefore, he's the man to help them understand and settle these disputes. The problem is they want to know about Moses' understanding of how you take care of hangnail. And that, she says it should be blue, and she says it should be pink. So Moses, which one do we do? Every little bitty thing they're coming to him with, and he's overwhelmed. And Jethro's advice is, look, no man is that good that they can carry the burdens of all the people. This is not good, Moses. Notice, realistically, up to this point, have we seen him call out Moses for sending Zipporah away? It makes it very clear that there's a bad situation, right? Moses sent her away somehow, whether he divorced her, he dismissed her, he sent her home, whether she went home angry. We don't really know what happened. But the situation was not good. And Jethro comes and apparently has the ulterior motive of trying to figure out what's going on. And once he sees what Moses is doing, he says, now we know the problem. Moses, you're taking on too much. And for the guys in the room, I'm going to ask you to just kind of keep your mouth shut for a second. But for your spouses and the ladies, how often does your guy take on too much? And we don't often realize that we've taken on too much until it's too late, right? So, what? Your lady's not here, but I can hear what she was saying. And she's turning around and giving you the look for
This, that's just a lot.
So, again, Moses is the man of God. He is God's chosen one. But just because he's God's chosen one doesn't mean he's free from mistakes. Doesn't mean that he's free from the natural tendency most men have of taking on too much. Thinking, I can handle this, I can handle this, I can handle this, until you can't handle it. And then it falls apart. Right?
What we don't know is, was Moses praying to God for guidance on how to handle all this? And this is God's answer to his prayer by sending his father-in-law in.
And I think there's probably some of that too. Because again, Jethro is a priest of God. So Jethro's probably listening to God too. And it's amazing how many times I have found myself inadvertently talking to a couple, talking to an individual, and I don't know what's going on, but I'm there at the right moment, and they make a statement, and I just give what God gives me in the moment, and it's exactly what they need to hear. So it could be that any kind of perceived marital issues that start this chapter actually become the catalyst for Moses to get the help that he needs. How many times have we seen throughout the book of Genesis and the first part of Exodus that the problem actually is what allows us to finally say, okay, God, I need help. And then someone cries out to God and he brings the help. Unfortunately, it often also comes with the person who's needing help doing something stupid. I mean, that just seems to be part of the gig, but any thoughts? Or do we finish the chapter?
Okay, I'm doing two Bible studies at the same time, so
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm in the right spot.
Go for
But last week, did we talk about testing?
it. A little bit, yeah.
This was his test.
God absolutely told Moses that he was going to test the people. Is Moses part of the people?
Yes.
Yes, Moses is a part of the people. Is Moses passing the test here?
He ended up, he had to get a breather, but then he did. He takes it back, everything ends up fine.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is a part of God's testing of Moses. Will you listen to me? Will you make sure that you're not getting too big for your britches? Will you understand that there is a way? If I have called you to this level of leadership, then I will also equip you to be able to handle this level of leadership in a way that you're not sacrificing your family. And how many times have we seen where people get promoted and the thing that often they lose is their family? They don't know how to handle the next level up with everything else that brought them to that place.
That's what I was taking from that is do God's work, but don't shirk your responsibilities at home.
Absolutely. Do God's work. Do what he asks you to, but you can't let it get in the way. Because I don't believe God would ever ask us to do something that was intentionally going to cause us to sacrifice our family. Right? What you got here?
Isn't in like Timothy, like First Timothy, it says something about like if you're putting someone forth for the church, like leadership in church, he has to have his own family in a row before he.
So that is the New Testament, but yes, if God is consistent throughout, then the qualifications God puts forth in the New Testament would still have been God's qualifications in the Old Testament. And one of the clear things it says is don't allow a person to be a leader in the church if they don't have their own family together. If their family is a mess, don't invite them to be a leader in the church. Don't invite them to be the pastor. Don't invite them to be the chair of the finance committee or the trustees or Because when you have a person whose family life is in shambles, are they gonna have the right mind in order to be able to lead in the church? Now, by the same token, I don't think what it's saying is, if your adult children aren't living their life the way they're supposed to, that doesn't exempt you from leadership. We're not talking about adult children here. But once a person becomes an adult, we've seen it time and time again, they have their own walk with God, and that's not on their parents. But for those who have kids at home, that's a part of your calling. I mean, one of the first things we see in Scripture, remember all the way back in Genesis 1 is the man shall leave his parents and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one. And that new family is a new creation in God's economy. And so when you're called to marriage, that is a calling. And just because God adds a calling like ministry doesn't mean that the marriage goes away or it becomes secondary. Melissa and I have seen a lot of, and some of it I think might have been the pandemic, but over the last 3 years, we've seen a lot of clergy families in a divorce. Now, granted, no one was prepared for what happened in the pandemic. No one was. And you guys here have experienced when a pastor's family falls apart. You know what kind of damage that can do. And I think realistically, when that's what's going on at home, the pastor needs help. They need to take a break. They need to get some help. They need to deal with it before they're ever put back into leadership. I think that's the godly way of handling this. And before this situation got out of hand, Jethro was saying, okay, let's go find out what's going on.
That makes sense. I disagree with you again, but it makes sense now.
So are you good then, or do we need to go through it, or do I need to hear your disagreement? Okay. I was confused there for a second. Like if we disagree, maybe I could be wrong. I'm willing to admit that. Finish the chapter? 24 through 27. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the peoples, chiefs over thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. That they judged the people at all times. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away to his own country.
So he left his wife and the kids there?
It doesn't say the wife and kids went back with him, it just says the father-in-law departed.
Isn't that the way our government is set up today? You got your city, state, federal, and small things in between.
And realistically, you probably shouldn't put somebody who, over on the state level, who hasn't done a good job at the city level. You shouldn't put anybody at the federal level who hasn't done a good job at the state level, right? I think this is a very unique story. And I think if you can't tell, it's got a lot of merit for our world today, doesn't it? Here we have some kind of a marital problem, but the marital problem isn't really the problem, is it?
It brought the solution.
The marital problem did bring the solution. You know, and Jethro could have just wiped Moses out, couldn't he? And Moses probably would have deserved it. But after Jethro evaluates the situation, he doesn't call Moses out for how he handled Zipporah and his grandsons. He says, look, dude, you're going to burn yourself out because you're not handling this well. What do you think?
I'm good with it.
It's a little bit of a hard story at first, isn't it? Definitely doesn't necessarily put Moses in the best of light.
But he's human.
But he's human. Absolutely. One of the things I love about Scripture is even our heroes, Scripture does not hide the fact that they are broken, fallen people. It lets them be real people who make dumb mistakes, who say dumb things, who do dumb things. And just for the record, the book of Exodus isn't over, so I guarantee you Moses is going to do some more dumb things. I'm just setting you up for that. It's going to happen. But just because he does dumb things, is he kept from being God's man? And man, is that reassuring. Any other thoughts or questions?
If we remember back, Moses really didn't want to do it.
There is that whole thing where Moses really didn't want this job in the first place. You know, it kind of had, I want to say this for the benefit of my daughter, he kind of had this burning bush headhunting situation where he wasn't really looking for anything. He was happy with what he had, you know, just being a backcountry shepherd, taking care of his flocks, got his wife, got his kids, living the dream. And, you know, this big corporate exec comes in a burning bush and says, hey, I've got a new job for you. I'm just saying, God absolutely saw his potential. God knew that he could be so much more if he would but listen. Does Moses take it at first? No, he complains, he tries to find every excuse. And even along the way, he's still not doing this thing the best possible. But God keeps working. And God sends the people that he'll listen to help him get the job done in the way that it needs to be done. And if you can't take some comfort from that story, if there is no way that in no way does your life relate to the story in some way, shape, or form, then man, I want to hear from you because your life must be bliss. What?
Or boring.
Or boring. That could be too. Ready to go to the next chapter? Time to shake things up.
No.
19, verse 1 through 6 is my first paragraph. On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, so new moons once every 28 days, so we're talking 84 days.
It says 2 months.
2 months?
So mine says two.
The third month.
What's his third one?
Mine says exactly 2 months after.
First day of the third month, mine says.
Mine says 50 days.
Wow.
What's the Hebrew say?
Writing down, go to the good book.
Go to the original language, see if it tells us something. Come on, think a little bit.
2 moons would be 2 months.
That 3 moon.
The third new moon is what.
That's 28.
In the third month,
Third month.
The beginning of the 3rd month.
so in the third month, since they left.
2 months have passed.
So at least 2 months have passed. 50 days would be pretty close to that. I mean, technically, I guess if you go 28 days between new moons, then that's 56. So we're getting in about that ballpark, somewhere in the middle. Probably closer to 2 months, but
Their calendar was.
their calendar was different. It's based on a 28-day month, because it was on the lunar cycle. Anyway, now that we've thoroughly exhausted that, on the third day, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the day that they came into the wilderness of Sinai. So we're now in a different area. We're not in the wilderness of Sin anymore. We're in the wilderness of Sinai. They encamped in the wilderness. There Israel encamped before the mountain while Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel, You yourself have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. What do you think?
Kind of like he's reassuring Moses who he is.
He's reassuring Moses, but he's also reassuring the people. Look, you guys have been carried through all this stuff. You've grumbled, but I'm telling you, I'm putting the past behind me. You're going to be my treasured people. You're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation for me. We'll let the past be the past. We're starting at square one right now, guys. Becky, you thinking something? No? Look like you almost had a thought or a question. Anybody?
Define day one.
I think probably realistically, because we know back in Exodus, it says at the Passover, God changed their calendar. Prior to that moment, they were dealing with the calendar of the Egyptians, the calendar of Mesopotamia. God gave them a different calendar that was based on his way of doing things. It was a 28-day month, 4-week month. It was based on the lunar calendar. And it had a standard year had 12 months, and 7 times every 20 years, they have 13 months. We're not quite getting there yet. That's actually discussed in the books coming up, but I'm just explaining. So the reality is they always knew when a month started because it would be on the new moon.
Okay.
So
I guess I got off on the wrong track there. The treasure.
being his treasure. I mean, it's kind of like when a parent calls their kid their treasured child.
I've got my notes say here. The people are a separated people, a special people, a purchased people, a holy people, redeemed people, and a sanctified people.
You have an amplified, is that what that is? Yeah, so it's pulling all of those meanings of the words. This notion of being a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Holy means set aside, set apart, everything. We've kind of made this a bigger than life kind of word, but it really does mean separate from, different from, in a way that's good. Oftentimes in our culture today, we think of different as being a bad thing, but holy is a different that's a good thing. Does that make sense? So I think God is very clearly saying, in spite of everything that has happened up to this point, in spite of all of your grumbling, in spite of all of your complaining, in spite of the fact that you have grumbled against the man I've chosen, in spite of the fact that the man I've chosen has screwed things up, you are still my treasured possession. You will be for me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Larry, all I can think of is their entire time through Genesis, you kept wondering, man, is this family ever going to learn? And regardless of whether or not they learn, God says here, I'm still choosing you. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? I mean, there's no real reason to choose Israel, is there? Up to this point? I mean, they may not be as bad as other nations, but they're definitely not good, are they? And I think that that's part of the point. As we go through and as we begin to see Israel becoming its own people, separate from the peoples around them, as they eventually become a kingdom and a nation unto themselves, as they begin to interact with other kingdoms instead of it being just this one family, we're gonna see time and time again, like they mess this thing up. And I think part of the reason why it is so interesting to see this right here is from the beginning, God is saying, I'm choosing you not because you're better than anybody else, not because you deserve it, but simply because I'm choosing you and I want you to be my ambassadors to the world. A priest's job is to help others draw close to God, right? I mean, in theory, that's the job of a priest. For all intents and purposes, they're the worship leader. They're supposed to help people draw in, come close to God. So if there are a kingdom of priests, then God is saying, despite yourself, I want you to be my people who help me draw the rest of the world unto me.
You know, there's a caveat on that.
Let's you caveat.
Verse 5 says, now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant.
Oh, there's that little piece, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
But it says what he wants for them, doesn't it? He says, this is what I want for you. This is what I want out of you. And it also says, this is how you're going to do it, by obeying my rules and my laws. And for the record, I hate to give you the spoiler, but really Israel struggles with this. With both aspects of it, following the rules and being a kingdom of priests. And being a holy nation for that matter. They're not really separate. They don't really do this very well. But then again, do we always do it very well? Any other thoughts or questions? Verse 7. 7 through about halfway through 9. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded. All the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever. Just for the record, they said yes. What? They signed the contract.
But he also made sure that they would hear him directly, not through a second person or third party.
Yeah, so in this, what we're reading so far, God's plan isn't just that they would see Moses as God's representative, but that they would literally hear from God themselves. Right? That's an interesting point. Is from everything you remember in the Old Testament, is that the way they relate to God? No. But God's plan A is that they would hear from him directly. Keep reading. Through 15. When Moses told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and be ready for the third day. For on the third day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, take care not to go up into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. That's an interesting little caveat. Okay.
I don't think we said that. I definitely added that.
It says relation, sexual relation.
Yeah, don't go.
Abstain from having
Abstain from sex.
I don't think the word second. I'm a little confused.
You think that's a Moses addendum here. 15. Yeah, it's the euphemism for having sex. Be holy, be devoted to me. Don't be thinking about your wife for this section.
I think it's really neat to have the third day there. That's what I was thinking about.
Ooh, I hadn't really put that together, but the third day is the day of resurrection, isn't it? It's the day for new life, new being, a new way of approaching things. Yeah. What else do you notice? Any other questions or thoughts?
A lot of do not touches.
No touchy.
Sounds like you're saying, put aside worldly things. Be
Yeah.
focused on me.
He's like, I'm going to consecrate you as my nation of priests. So for the next 3 days, focus on me. Get yourself ready. Don't be focused on the things of this world. Prepare yourself for what I'm about ready to give you.
Or you die.
And if you get too close to me, you die. There's that reverence piece. Don't obey my rules, right? Anything else?
We have to remember that the Old Testament is a lot of laws. These are even God's laws. We're getting ready for the Ten Commandments, but it's God's laws that He wants of His people.
Remember back when we started this in Genesis, He said, be my people, trust me, I will provide for you, I will be God. And they didn't trust Him, did they? And they fell to sin, and everything falls apart. And here He is saying, you will be my people, and I'll be your God. Just trust me on this. And right now, they seem like they're gonna do it. Maybe.
You gotta talk to them directly.
And He's still talking to them directly. He's talking to them, and He's talking through Moses. It's not just Moses as an intermediary. This is a more personal relationship than what we tend to think of from the Old Testament, isn't it? As Christians, we talk about the Holy Spirit dwelling in us in this personal relationship with Christ, and we tend to want to think that the Old Testament, that wasn't the plan. But yet here, remember, God walked with Adam in the garden, right? And here God is wanting to speak to the people as a whole. That's a very different relationship, a very different religion than what we tend to think of the Jewish faith of being, isn't it? Next paragraph, 16 through 20. On the morning of the third day, there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called to Moses on top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Kind of does sound like a volcanic eruption. I hadn't really thought of that, but
You wouldn't go up a mountain that was volcanic active right then.
yeah, I wouldn't want to go up a volcano that's erupting. Unless I knew I had a helicopter ready to take me out,
I said he's gonna come from cloud, he didn't say he's coming.
But yes, God said He's going to descend on a cloud, but how has God been representing Himself? A pillar of cloud and fire. Up to this point, God has been, this is still consistent with how God has presented Himself, isn't it?
That kind of brings up the point Grant said earlier about putting faith in God for keeping his wife there. How many people would walk up to fire? That shows
Moses is used to it.
I was gonna say, yeah, there's the whole burning bush incident.
Right, but I'm saying that that's not.
That's a small
That's
bush.
something
This
that
is,
most people don't like.
yeah, yes, this is something that most people would be afraid of. And yeah, the burning bush was fire. It was a small contained fire. Now we got the whole mountain on fire. I'm assuming nothing is burned, you know, that's the way God likes to roll, right? Anything else? Anybody here just a little bit intimidated of God when you think of what this might have been?
Yeah, volcano eruption, I think we do.
If it's a volcanic eruption, yeah, it's just a little bit terrifying.
That's probably.
Thunder and lightning and rumbling and fire and smoke and
Maybe it was an earthquake instead of a volcano.
could be an earthquake,
Because there's smoke everywhere, there's fire.
horn blasts. I mean, this
Sounds like living in the Midwest to me.
sounds like living in the Midwest. Next paragraph, where do you found something?
What? I didn't know if it said the mountain was on fire. It says was completely enveloped in smoke. The Lord came down on it in fire. The Lord came down on it in fire.
So the Lord came down in fire. Where else have we heard that kind of thing? I'll give you a hint. This is a New Testament story. We tend to celebrate it, I don't know, about like 50 days after Easter. Pentecost. The Lord came down in fire on the people, right? It's that same imagery, isn't it? Pentecost is this again. Which probably should give us a hint as to how the people are going to react. If God had to do it again later after Jesus ascended into heaven, then what do you think is probably going to happen this time? Read the rest of the paragraph, or the rest of the chapter. 21. And the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord to look, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, set limits around the mountain and consecrate. And the Lord said to him, go down and come up and bring Aaron with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them.
So God is just getting close enough. He talks to Moses and lets them hear. He's not really speaking to them.
Right?
Correct? He lets Moses go up the mountain, and you guys have to watch. Don't
Right.
come too close.
Right?
And then you get to Jesus, and that all kind of changes.
I think the way I interpret this story is God is bringing his full power to bear in front of the people to say, I am God. Everything that you thought you saw in Egypt, that was all fake. This is real. But at the same time, he's also saying, I am God and I'm choosing you. And I want you guys to keep me holy. I want you to understand your relationship with me. But understand, while you can't draw near to me, I am drawing near to you. And he's still setting Moses apart as his man. Moses is allowed to come up, and now he's setting Aaron apart as one of his men. And Aaron is allowed to come up too. God is clearly stating who he has chosen, but he's also making it clear that he's chosen them. And I think that's pretty powerful, isn't it? I mean, he's still giving us the boundaries of the relationship. You can come all the way to this point, but don't come any further, because I'm God and you're not. And I don't want to have to, I don't want you to be burned up and for my chosen, I'm going to bring them up. And everybody is hearing. I mean, what they don't hear, Moses is relaying. The message is clear at this point. Right?
And it doesn't really say that a bunch of people step over the line.
It just keeps warning them, but we haven't heard that anybody actually has. So as far as we know right now, for once in their lives, they're obeying the rules.
Well, it makes me think of like the smog around a volcano.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be able to walk through that unless God was, protecting you. So Moses and Aaron wouldn't be able to go through that, and everybody else would be stuck.
If we keep Leah's volcano imagery and what Grant was saying, when it's actively bubbling, it's hard to see. It's, if there's not a good breeze going, you can't even tell what's safe and what's not safe. And so it would require God making the way for them to go to where they need to get to have the conversation.
I think it gives them a fear of God too.
Yeah,
Don't cross the boundary.
it's clear
You're my
that
people, but don't push it.
you're my people, but don't push it. It's clear I'm choosing you. It's clear you're favored, but understand what you're dealing with. I can shake this mountain. And all of a sudden, as I was saying that, all I could hear is, don't make me stop this car.
When you come back there.
Don't make me come back there. Or don't make me separate you, boy. For those who are watching King of the Hill, but
So do you think that like the Forrest family on the other side of the mountain could see all this going on?
oh, you have to imagine that all the people.
Like, what the heck is going on over there? There's strobe lights and.
Yeah, everyone in the region is seeing what's happening. This is not a minor event.
So then how does that make the other people in the other mountains feel they're inferior to people that God has chosen?
As you were saying that, all I can think of is some kind of a Far Side comic where people are bowing down to a little idol, and then all of a sudden in the background you see the volcano erupt. Oh! Again, for me, I still want to go back to this point that God has said, you will be my chosen people, a holy nation and a kingdom of priests. Never was it meant for the children of Israel to hold their elected status as something that they were better than everyone else. They were called out. Yes, they were chosen, absolutely. But they were chosen to be God's representatives in the world so that the rest of the world would come to God.
But I think the Jewish people do feel that way.
Oh, they absolutely still feel like they're God's elect and chosen people. But they also feel like they're the arbiters of whether or not another person should be allowed in.
They are.
And that never happens in the church, does it?
I haven't ever seen it. But there's so much in this that you think, God's showing himself.
God is putting himself out there in a very real and present and powerful way. He's telling them what he wants for them. He's giving them the boundaries to keep them safe.
So are there 1 million priests then out of that?
I think that was his point. Thus why I think 1 Peter says these very things. You are my chosen people, a holy nation, a kingdom of priests. This is reiterated in the New Testament because it's what God wanted all along. It wasn't about choosing one people to set them apart as better than. It was about choosing a set of people to be the first of many. The problem is they got hung up on the fact that they're the chosen ones, not on what their task was as the chosen ones. Does that make sense? Because remember, all the way back what we read, last spring, Egyptians came out with the Israelites and they were folded in. The name Israel isn't really a name, it's a title. It's the one in whom God is wrestling and the one who wrestles with God. God wants any and everyone who's willing to be a part of Israel. And I think that this is proving it right here. This isn't just some theoretical thing. God is meeting with them with the fullness of his being in a way that the world can experience it and see it and understand. And he's meeting them at this place. As close as face to face can be since the garden when he walked with Adam. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? So with that, you want to go in and read what is probably some of the most familiar Old Testament passages? Chapter 20. And I'm just going to read 1 through 21 altogether. I know it's more than one paragraph, and I know that's not the way I normally do it, but these are very familiar. And so understand our setting, understand what has happened, and take that into consideration as you hear this passage. Verse 20, chapter 20, verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation to those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servants, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servants, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. And when all the people saw thunder and flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoke, the people were afraid and trembled. And they stood far off, and said to Moses, you speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The people stood far off, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was.
What happened to Aaron?
He's there. No, apparently at this point he's not important. Does that put the Ten Commandments in a little bit different light?
We just talked about just going up to the mountain, getting up back.
Yeah, I mean, we just think about Moses going up on the mountain, getting the Ten Commandments and coming back. Yet realistically, these were given to Moses in a way that everyone heard, right? And when he brings it down to the people to make sure that they've got it, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We weren't for sure what we're getting into here. Moses, you go talk to God and we'll listen to you. And just before, didn't they say, absolutely, we'll do whatever God asks? Yeah.
In mine, it says, you speak to us and we will listen, but don't let God speak directly to us or we will die. That makes me feel like if I was in that situation and I was the one who said that, it makes me feel like I would say, if God is willing to meet that power alone would kill me, or like that's just pure intimidation.
Yeah, they kind of missed the point, didn't they? They see the power of God. They heard the word that God says, don't come on the mountain or you'll die. But they missed the part about God drawing close to them. They missed the part about how he wanted to have a relationship where he could speak to all of them. Correct.
But you understand how loud God had to be to speak to all those people? Millions of people, thousands of people.
Except that all I want to do is think of Isaiah, and yet I heard God not in the fire, and not in the whirlwind, and not in the earthquake, but in the still small voice. God doesn't have to be loud for us to hear him. But in this case, God is bringing all of himself to bear on earth in a way that shows his power, his immensity, his authority, and yet he still invites them to draw near in a way that keeps them safe. And all they see is his power and the fear of being overwhelmed, the fear of being destroyed, the fear of being undone, as Braxton was alluding to. And they miss the part where God is the one drawing close. They miss the part where these rules were so that they could live in relationship with him and with each other in a way in which God continued to draw close to them. Yes, Leah.
Well, back in verse 13, it even says that when the ram's horn sounds a long blast, then the people may go up. And now the people are too afraid to even try to even listen to go up to him directly.
So he gives them the cue on when the people are supposed to come up. And even when that time comes, they're too afraid to come up. So what does this make you think about anytime that someone says, well, you know, that God of the Old Testament, he's a God of wrath and a God of judgment? Does it say today? I mean, that's what we say, right? God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And this to me seems like it's a loving God, doesn't it?
Yes.
Doesn't sound like a wrathful God to me. I mean, he's being clear. There's boundaries to the relationship. But I don't see this as the hate-filled, vengeful, wrathful God. But instead, I do see, as Braxton saying, this notion that people are now becoming afraid and they are pushing God away. Anything that you notice in the 10, what the Jews call the 10 words, not the 10 commandments. But when you think of the setting and what's going on, does it make you look at those 10 commandments differently?
It was to the people, not just to Moses.
It was absolutely to the people.
How did we miss it?
Because it's easy to just read over the story and get the big points and miss the details. But then, as we've said before, and as the saying goes, the devil really is in the details.
But, you know, even as, I'm thinking as we teach the children in the children ministry, I know how I was taught, and Moses went up on the mountain and he got the stones and he threw them, and that's not what we're hearing tonight.
And some of that is still true. We haven't got to that part of the story yet. But the truth is, we missed the part where God was intending to speak to everyone. And at this point, God's thundering, God's presence so frightens the people that they're like, okay, God, give us a plan B, because your plan A is too much for us. We will be undone through your plan. Which, come to think of that, is that any different than what Adam and Eve did with the fruit? They saw that the fruit was good for knowledge and that it was good for food. And so they took it and they ate it. And God said, let me care for you. Let me be God and tell you what's good and what's not. And here God is telling them, let me be God and tell you what's good and what's not. I will keep you safe. You will be my people. I will be your God. And the sad thing for me in this is in these last verses, the people are saying, no, you speak to Moses and let Moses speak to us. We can't have this personal relationship you're wanting. Yeah?
Well, what's, I think the most confusing is, just a few chapters ago, the Lord literally split the sea and they walked through it, but the fear wasn't coming from God, it was coming behind them, pushing them to God.
Fear, when rightly experienced, should always push us to God, not away from God. The fear of the Lord should cause us to draw to Him, not should send us away. That's I think, one of the things we'll wrestle with time and time again as we're reading the Old Testament.
I don't know what's scarier, volcanoes hitting or splitting the sea, seeing the waters.
Finish the chapter. 22 through 26. And the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the people of Israel, you have seen for yourself that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver to be with me, nor shall you gods of gold. An altar of earth you shall make for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stones, for if you wield your tools on it, you profane it. And you shall not go up by steps to the altar, that your nakedness be not exposed.
I don't understand that last.
So a little bit of fashion, just for the record. At this point in time in human history, men wore robes, women wore pants. And if a man is, think of like a kilt. But if a man is going up steps to offer a sacrifice, what might happen? Well, not a trip, but
A little exposure.
there might be a breeze and a little bit of exposure. By the same token, the practice of the day was whenever people wanted to worship their God, they would want to build the altar as high as possible to get it as close to God as possible. But what does God say? Build it out of the earth, out of uncut stones, and I will come meet you there. You don't have to come up to me. I will come down to you. Don't build something elaborate as if that's going to make me listen to you anymore than if you didn't. It's about your attitude with me, not about how you're trying to impress me or make me bend to your will. Yeah?
Which is the total opposite of what you think of Greek and Roman gods.
It's total opposite of what we tend to think of the Egyptian and Greek and Roman gods. They're all about, no, you need to impress me before I'll ever listen to you.
So Solomon built the temple, so how did that change all of a sudden?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's some pieces of the Solomon's temple, but the other side of it is it was all one level. Now, there were steps in the basin and there were steps to the altar, but it is because of their size. It wasn't that you were going up to them. And also by then, we'll get the priestly garments, we'll get at the end of the book of Exodus, where priests actually wore linen trousers and a linen shirt underneath the robe that they wore to keep themselves warm. Yes?
I like also the build my altar wherever I cause my name to be remembered.
Yeah, it's not about finding the holy place. It's not about finding some special place to God. It's about everywhere that he causes his name to be remembered. Which, think about as Christians, what do we say? Where can you pray to God? Anywhere. Anywhere and everywhere. You can approach God. And even back in Exodus, he's saying the very same thing. He's saying it to them in the way that they understand their world, in the way that the people around them have done these things, but he's augmenting it. He's saying you don't have to do this to impress me. Just call on my name. Just bring your sacrifices and I will meet you there. Again, this whole chapter, the last two chapters, 19 and 20, is the God who's drawing near to them. I mean, the whole book of Exodus, the God who hears them, the God who delivers them, the God who releases them from captivity, the God who releases them from Pharaoh and the army of Egypt, the God who saves them through the water, the God who provides for them the food and the meat when they can't find it, the God who gives them water when there's no water to be found. And now it's the God who draws near with all his power and meets them in spite of the fact that they're still pushing back.
But after all of this, how could anybody question his strength and?
I don't know. How could anybody question it? Why does anybody question it? I don't understand. I personally, even for as bad as sometimes life is, even for all the heartaches that sometimes get thrown at us, even for all the times when we don't understand, if you allow yourself to see the goodness of God, he's there every moment with us, even in the bad parts. And he's still bringing good out of it.
But we still have our free will. And there are some people who
Oh, that free will thing, yes.
will not accept it because I think Satan has gotten into them a little bit and clouded their vision.
And it's not just Satan. Let's just be honest. We don't always like it ourselves. It doesn't even have to be Satan.
He can create doubt in all of us.
I know he can, and I do believe that at times he does, but I'm just saying I don't want to blame Satan, because let's be honest, as human beings, we're perfectly capable of doubting God on our own. We're perfectly capable of seeing the truth right in front of us and saying, no, that can't be real. And so on the one hand, I want to be really harsh with the people of Israel, but on the other hand, man, I is them. Right? Any final thoughts before we close in prayer? Let's pray. Lord, we are amazed that we don't deserve it. We definitely didn't earn it. But Lord, that you have drawn near to us. You know all our faults, our failures. You've heard our grumbling and our complaining. You've seen our doubts and our fears. And yet you keep inviting us in. Lord, may we heed your call. May we receive your blessings. And Lord, may we live into that call to be a kingdom of priests and to help the world see your goodness as well. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Reminder, we won't be here next week, and I'm sorry, I'm looking forward to this. I love this. But in 2 weeks, I hope you'll be ready, and we'll dig in. We can look back at 20 again if we need to. We'll move on to 21. Thank you all.
But then you